All right, welcome back. Pretty excited about this video. I think I'm pretty certain it's like the first one I've ever recorded where there's someone else on here. And I'll do a quick introduction here in a second. But this is all going to be about the Kraken SDR and TAK server setup and configuration, maybe a little bit of federation, and talking about a new particular project that's going to send the Kraken SDR data to the TAK server. So, a lot going on. Uh, what you're going to see on the screen right now is, really a Google Meet with the SignalMedic, the developer of the Kraken to TAK. I showed in a previous video, which required the use of Node-RED. Well, now fast forward, there's a more development has been done and no longer requires Node-RED. It's all like just Python based. And so with that, I just want to turn it over to the Signal Medic. He's going to have to be recording from his side. I'll splice things together after, so you may see a little jump in the video, but I want you to be able to hear what he is saying as well. So go ahead.
Appreciate it. The goal was to reduce the need for the additional service, and somebody that just had the Kraken software, like the Pi image, for instance, without installing another service, could uh, get that georeference data into an ATAK client. So we worked on a Python implementation of Kraken attack. Now also have a dashboard at 8,000 endpoint by default, and built in a couple new features. So we can identify each Kraken by a station ID, which makes it useful if you have multiple Krakens running at the same time. And I think the dashboard just makes it a little bit more user friendly. So in this example, we have one Kraken pointing to a cloud-based TAK server, and we have a second Kraken here. So this is at the endpoint .16, and a second Kraken server at endpoint .152 that we've named Kraken Station ID 2, but going to the same TAK server. And on our client device here, we have each Kraken, and as I push to talk, we can see that those points work together, and kind of advantageous. But there's a few additional features in here, filtering out DOAs by basically wedging them out by the DOA bearing. So if for example we weren't concerned with anything to the north, we could filter all those lines out so they wouldn't show. We can also persist DOA lines. So right now, as I push to talk, these lines just overwrite each other to keep the screen from getting too cluttered. But if we persist the DOA line, now each time we push to talk, a new line will be created. And if we persist the other Kraken server DOA line, we can see that a line for each individual point will be created. Could end up, cluttering the map, but might be useful in some circumstances.
All right, and so I just want to make sure. So the image on the bottom there, that is the like a TAK client on like an Android phone that you're streaming to right now.
Yeah, it's a phone that I have plugged into my computer, running ATAK that you would get from Google Play Store in this case. Um, and then I have my TAK server pulled up here, where I've created an input for the Kraken, and that's what I have, pointing within the Kraken to TAK dashboard as the endpoint, the destination. This broadcasting button, ATAK, comes by default with a multicast port open. We can turn that off, and in this case it is off. But if we didn't have a TAK server, you would just ensure enable mesh mode, a mesh network mode, is on, and then ensuring that the broadcasting button was green as opposed to red and not sending multicast. So you don't need to be connected to a TAK server, but provides for a more secure connection.
And then also in your case, like the two Kraken endpoints you talked about, you have the, maybe it's a Pi or something that is running the software in your case for the Kraken, I believe.
Yeah, that's right. I just have the Kraken Pi image for this southern Kraken SDR, and then the northern one is actually a WarDragon that I've just git cloned the Kraken TAK Python project to.
All right. All right. So I guess I will jump over and just briefly show a quick setup of the Kraken to TAK in a WarDragon here on this side. So let me see. And there's a lot of different screens, so hopefully I can get this right, but let's check this out. All right. Okay, so in this case, this is a WarDragon. The resolution looks a little funny because I just have it hooked into a small little monitor, but the goal with the WarDragon is out of the box, it's generally pretty easy to set up the TAK server, and also I've made sure that the Kraken to TAK code is already git cloned down. Of course, you can clone this down to anything. It doesn't necessarily have to be the WarDragon. If you have something else that has the Kraken software on it, more than welcome to add it to there. In this case, on the WarDragon, pretty certain I put it in user source Kraken to TAK Python, and so I have that there, as well as also you'll notice in a WarDragon in the home directory I have the Kraken SDR underscore DOA software I've talked about in the past, and that is installed and set up. You just need to, if you've not automated the startup of it, I'm going to start that up. That is going to interact or interface with the Kraken SDR, which I'm just going to note I've got a little over 5 volts, definitely 3 amp power supply feeding into it, so make sure you give it adequate power, and then I have it plugged into the WarDragon, so I should be able to give it a little bit here, and on 8080. All right, gave it a few seconds here, and the Kraken DOA software on the WarDragon started up. I do not have a really proper antenna array attached. I just have some antennas attached, and if I look under, all right, my spectrum here. Let's see if I'm at least able to get something here. Let's see. I'm gonna bump up the receiver gain just for a minute. I just want to get something within the spectrum view here, just so I can get my DOA estimation going. So okay, so 105. So you've got your Kraken SDR software running, and then as mentioned in the other or previously, the Kraken to TAK Python. If I just do a Python 3, it'll look for GPSD if you have a GPS puck plugged in and use that to update GPSD, but I don't in this case. I just have the Kraken software set to just a bogus static configuration. And so in this case, I'm now sending uh, locally. Locally I'm looking for the Kraken information because the Kraken SDR software is running on here. So I've just left the IPv4 default. I've left it station ID default 1, but my TAK server is on my local network here. I've shown it in a previous video how to set that up at 147 port 8087. So let me quickly jump over to my TAK server, and I just want to point out a couple things. It was talked about in a previous video, but I showed how to set up a endpoint, or sorry, input, called it TAK underscore Kraken, and I have that basically on a non-SSL port that I talked about. So, refer to a previous video on how to get that information in there. So if I look at my WebTAK and zoom out a little bit, I'm going to see my Kraken, just like you saw with the SignalMedic holding up the phone. Just in this case, I'm looking at WebTAK. I'm seeing my Kraken SDR sending those lines of bearing real time to the TAK server. So I think we're set there. And then SignalMedic already talked about his the Python interface, so I don't think I need to touch on that. But what I do want to touch on is something new in this particular video is doing the federation. So me and the SignalMedic tried to federate our servers together. And how do we do that? Well, I got to remind myself here, but kind of the big first step. And if I say anything wrong there, SignalMedic, just correct me. But we imported each other's ca.pem cert, and that normally should be able to be done under the upload Federate certificate authority. In the case of my TAK server, like I showed being set up in a previous video, I think there was some permission-based issues with the Fed Trust Store versus me trying to use a web interface within Docker. So where you normally would be able to upload and browse for your CA-PEM from the other server, so you do this on both sides, both people have to do this. I had to do it from the command line. And if you look at the repository I have pulled up now, I added a little line under federated TAK server pointing to what I needed to do, which was use this key tool. So I literally just pulled up a command line prompt and used a key tool with the kind of what you see here, except for I did the command line command within the same directory where my ca.pem is, as you see with the TAK file. I'm sure you could specify where the ca.pem is, but I just want to point that out. I was saying, hey, key tool, use the ca.pem, import to the Fed Trust Store.jks JKS, and gave it an alias of TAK. So in the case of the WarDragon, and this probably applies to other TAK server Docker-based setups, or maybe even non-Docker setups, but in my TAK server, TAK certs files, I know this is saying downloads, but on the WarDragon, it's TAK server is pretty much just in the home directory. You will see there's the Fed Trust Store and the ca.pem. Now, don't see. I just want to be careful. I think you don't want to overwrite your own ca.pem, so just be aware of what you're doing there, so you don't copy over and replace. Is that correct, SignalMedic? We both have ca.pems, right?
Yeah, but they're unique. It's just the same name. So we exchange the CA-PEM file for each tax server, load that into Federate certificate authorities, and then either one of us, once that exchange has happened, can create outgoing connection under configuration and federation.
And then once you have that set up, if you come back to your TAK server administrative section under Federation, you would make sure that Federation is enabled. You can also take a peek at the configuration, but you shouldn't have to do much there. You just make sure it's enabled and hit save. And then you can create an outgoing connection, which I did here in this case. I'll just edit and show. Gave it a display name, the address of the cloud-based TAK server, port, reconnect interval, and pretty certain I left everything else the same, which was a protocol version enabled, and I put no fallback and hit save. after that, the only other thing that I could think of, I think that created the connection between the two. So you should see something similar here as far as connected. The only other thing is you can see my process count is going up, and to get that to happen, we went under our administration section here, manage users. I added a new group called Dragon. I mean, you can name it whatever you want, and I just made sure that actually, let me see.
Yeah, you're right on there. You want to make sure, generally speaking, make sure that your clients belong to a group that is other than the anon default group,
Okay,
and you're going to include that group as one of the federated groups.
okay. So, all right, just to reiterate, add adding a new group, making sure that that group I think belongs in both. Is it or no? Actually, so okay. So I added a new group, view edit groups. I add the new group to basically both, so that I'm not just relying on this anon group. Update, save, and then that basically allowed the oops federation that allowed the communication back and forth between our two servers. And in that case, kind of brings us to where we're at now. So I just point out I'm still getting the info in from the Kraken, but you may be wondering why I'm not actually. So in this case, I actually am receiving. I've got multiple lobs, which, correct me if I'm wrong. I think you're still kind of sending them in manually.
No, not anymore. On my
Oh,
side, I've created a feed, and I've um, added the points to the feed here. Um,
okay. So just because I don't think that the audio is coming through for both of us in this case, it does appear that we have federated our servers together. On your side, you're adding the lobs into a feed. And because previously, I think you were having to send them across manually, which is not like, the expected way that this should have turned out. But now I'm seeing the lobs coming through from the SignalMedics two Kraken SDRs on his side, sending to his TAK server, federated, synced basically over to my server, so that I'm seeing all of your lobs plus my lobs from my local Kraken server. So I feel like it's working pretty well right now.
yeah, it's looking good on my side.
Okay, and then so one other thing, not to make this even more confusing, I also talked about this in a previous video, was the and I apologize, I don't have the repository pulled up for it. It's definitely not my project. There's an individual doing a ATAK client in Go. It's the only thing that I have seen open source for Linux, and I talked about that previously. I've built the binary that's also in the WarDragon, and that is this tab here, running on my local computer. I know I'm flip flopping back and forth here. This is another DragonOS desktop, basically, but it is also connected to my TAK server. And what's interesting about it is I can see so I can see the SignalMedic's two locations of the Kraken, but no lines of bearing, and I just suspect that is because the Go ATAK client is probably not accounting for those lobs and doesn't know what to do with them yet. So definitely something worth bringing up with the developer there, and then that would be pretty interesting to have a full blown Linux TAK essentially client where I'm not having to go look at the WebTAK. I can just have in the case of say the WarDragon, could have a Linux based, or it does have this Go ATAK client on it. It would just be nice to potentially get the lobs and stuff in here, because then the WarDragon could be subscribed to or connected to an external TAK server. So I think I hit on everything. I know that was like covering a lot. I'll try and like maybe come back around as this gets more refined with the federation and I understand it a little bit more and maybe come back and break each little piece down. But I just wanted to highlight the work that SignalMedic has done because this doesn't have to be limited again to like the WarDragon or whatever. I think just straight up for anybody that uses the Kraken SDR or the Pi image, you could literally pull in the Python code and then be sending to a TAK server. You could potentially even use like an Apple phone with accessing the WebTAK or actually I'm kind of making an assumption. Is there any client for an Apple phone?
Yeah, you can download iTAC from the Apple Play Store, which this project does represent the only way that I know of to use the Kraken SDR with an iPhone.
Yeah, I think that's pretty good. Unless you had anything else that I missed or you wanted me to cover.
No, I appreciate your time and all the work. The hope is to maybe make this repository part of the WarDragon or the DragonOS build at some point.
Yeah, absolutely. That's my intent. In fact, I think I already pulled it in there. And so I thank you for all the work that like you're putting into this and for, taking the time today to like do this. I will the video may turn out a little, spliced together, but we'll merge it together and share this. So appreciate the time and thanks everybody for tuning in to watch this.